what's up, everybody? We are live on issue number 31 on the Steve and Cimino Says Boom podcast, food show, and we got a special guest here. Steve, what's going on? What's going on?
Ball!
Hey everyone, welcome to Pop XP. And before the show starts, make sure to click that subscribe button and click the bell to get notifications when we go live and we upload awesome new content. And don't forget, if you can, make sure to share our stream on all your social media outlets. We appreciate it, and thanks for helping us grow the Pop XP channel.
Hey, what's up, everybody? All bets are off because we're live. That means there's no retakes, no reshoots, no nothing. Keep your pants on, keep your shirt on, and we got to do it. Now, what do people need to know?
Oh man, people need to know that they need to click that subscribe button below and smash that bell to get notifications when we go live and we upload some awesome new content. It's going to be a great show tonight, and I'm ready to dive into some pages, gentlemen. So what do we have forthcoming?
Okay, people usually know me and Steve got a big mouth and big ego, and we think we're know-it-alls, right, Steve? We think we know it all. But this time we're going to go a little bit we're going to take our little sidestep and let a master step out. Steve, tell everybody what's going to happen today. Because this guy right here, I don't know who he is. He's coming to teach us something.
I'm the cleaning lady. I heard he's a brand new creator that's going to begin at Marvel pretty soon, so we're going to welcome him on. You know what? All joking aside, today is a very special day. This is something that this show has been specifically designed for, okay? First-hand accounts from the creators themselves about specific pieces of history. And I'm not joking today. We are talking history, major history, okay? Today, Roy Thomas is going to explain to us page by page the first appearance of the Vision and his origin, Avengers 57 and 58 for the first time ever.
So Roy, before we get into the issues, why don't you tell us what Stan Lee wanted you to do with your little this little character called the Vision?
Okay, well, I need to start from the fact that I was constantly on Stan's case. Well, not constantly, but every little bit on Stan's case about the fact that I felt I was down to a bare bones, weak version of the Avengers, much weaker than when he had written it with, Captain America, Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, and Hawkeye, because Captain America was such a natural leader and central figure, just a great character. But what I was stuck with now was the Black Panther, who, good character, but he wasn't setting the world on fire, and and so forth at the time. Goliath, who had failed in his own series. He could grow to be really big, but he wasn't like a great character. The Wasp, whose great power was to grow small enough that you could squash him with a pin, And Hawkeye, he could shoot you with a bow and arrow, And that was it. Those were the only characters that I had that were real every issue members. Every time I'd bring in Cap, Thor, and or Iron Man, he'd make me take him out right away when he noticed. So finally one day, and he'd have me put in Hercules to try to take care of Thor. That just didn't quite work, although he was a good character. So finally, Black Widow, I had her in for a while. But, she added to the female thing. I was kind of lacking in that area, but she didn't have any superpowers or anything. And so I felt like, I needed a new character. Finally, one day, I don't know why, because I didn't bring it up. Stan suddenly called me in and said, you're always talking about need a new Avenger. We do need a new Avenger. I said, oh, great. So, and I had an idea. I'd been thinking about bringing in the old, I guess it was Kirby or Simon Kirby. I don't know how much, who did what, if Simon was involved in it or what. There were no credits on the series. But the Vision from the early 40s in, I guess, Marvel Mystery Comics. And he was a character who lived in another dimension. He could enter with smoke or fire, he could enter our world, and he went back. And I was going to have him come in and sort of be trapped on Earth, I guess, a little like the Silver Surfer. He couldn't come back. And Stan didn't like that idea. He said he didn't like the name the Vision much, and he thought it was fairly weak compared to some other names, and he didn't think the character was much what he remembered of him, because we had never really discussed him much before, but he remembered him just enough to know he didn't care that much for him. So he said, no. What I want is I want the new Avenger to be an android. He didn't tell me why. He didn't say to explore the human condition or any profound words. I guess he just sort of figured throw Roy in the deep end and let him figure it out. But he had no other. I said, nothing else. That's it. Yeah, an android. I said, yeah. Well, since I had otherwise relative carte blanche, and since I knew that any new character that I was going to create, I wouldn't own a piece of. I was giving it to the company. So I figured, well, I'm just going to see if I can get away with this. I'm going to make up a new Vision. He's not really the Vision at all. He has the name and look of the Vision, but he's really a new character. With the android thing, he has nothing really much in common with the old Vision, except the look. Change him a little bit, give him a chest symbol, a diamond. I swiped off the Spy Smasher character from the 1940s, and make him red instead of green, because we had green Hulks, blue Atlanteans, and if we made him white, you'd have been able to see through and see the paper marks on the other side. So I came up with red, which Stan never liked later. So that's the whole thing. And once that was done, Stan didn't see the whole thing until the issue was penciled, and we'll get around to that in a moment. So I just decided, well, I'll call him the Vision. He'll look a lot like the old Vision, but he isn't the old Vision. And that way, that satisfies my usual thing. I'm not giving away something I totally created. I'm giving away something that I, adjusted, partly created. Even Stan, in a sense, besides just Jack or Joe, Stan is a co-creator too, of the way of the Vision, because he said an android, and I wouldn't have done that otherwise. So that's Stan's contribution. So it was a multi-character creation, even though it was sort of John, Buscema, and me, but there were Stan and Jack back in there too.
Wow. So what we're going to do for you people out there is Roy's going to go page by page of Avengers 57 and 58. So now, why don't you start it off?
Boom.
All right. I got my little book here, so if I look down sometime, well, we went to the splash page. The cover came later, so we shouldn't discuss that now. What was a wonderful cover, though, and I think it was Stan's idea to do what we call a knockout cover, which would be all red or one color, as opposed to the natural color, which was an interesting, vision, because that means that when you turn the page, the first time you see the Vision looking like the Vision looks, the green and yellow coloring that's fairly close to the old one, except there was some red in the old one. And so you turn the page, you immediately see this, and I can still remember, for some reason, John mailed me, as he sometimes did, out in my apartment in Brooklyn that year, the pencils to either the whole or a large part of the story, probably the whole thing. And I just remember walking around the apartment there, by myself during the day. My roommate, Len Brown, was off at work, and just being knocked out by the beauty of the artwork. From the moment I saw the splash page, I had described the scene. You see the guy walking along the street, getting closer, and then suddenly he kind of floats up in the air. I want him to kind of float. He doesn't fly like Thor would fly, hurling a hammer, or like Iron Man would fly. It's more like floated. The thing becomes weightless, which is sort of what he does. And because he had a cape, and not many new characters had capes in those days. Thor had one, but the cape had been kind of abandoned because it doesn't really help you fly. It just is an encumbrance in a way. And and John came up with this thing, the graceful step of having him occasionally just kind of, grab hold of his cape, and it just gave this extra kind of graceful look to him. And that even though he's a muscular character, he looks graceful, not just like a muscle bound hero. So there he is floating up, and we don't know why the rain doesn't touch him, but there he is floating up in the sky, and behold the Vision. It was just such a beautiful drawing. It was just inspiring. My words aren't up to the picture, but I was doing the best I could.
Next page.
All right, so the next page is just the first page, with the character coming in, he's listening, and I did the usual thing. Wasp wants to get married. She thinks, oh shucks, he almost popped the question this time, or something. So it's nothing much, just holding up. But by the end of the page, where we suddenly get it, we see that the Vision is entered. We still don't see what his power is, because you don't know if the window was closed or open or whatever. So, but it's just introducing the situation.
Next page.
Okay, you're gonna say, yeah, okay. Next, yeah, this is the first page that have a wonderful shot of the Vision looking just kind of accusing. He really has this look like the old Kirby characters, with all that long, lanky but muscular legs and so forth. She flies out and he's trapped, and then we come to the first thing, and I don't know what went wrong here or if anything did, but that bottom panel where the Vision comes through the wall, that's not John Buscema. It's inked by the inker, the relatively new inker, George Klein, who came over from DC. But whatever, I don't remember what he had. There was obviously the Vision coming through a wall. I don't know what part of it exactly, but whatever it was, Stan didn't like that drawing. So, that was done by Marie Severin. She drew that picture in pencil. So I have no idea. I don't think, we didn't make copies of the original art on the pages, and so I have no idea what John Buscema actually drew there. I wish I could see, but every time I look at this, I like Marie's work, but it stands like a sore thumb because, it doesn't have that anatomy and that graceful look that John gave it. I wish Stan had left well enough alone, but I couldn't tell him that. He very well may have been right. It's certainly not a bad shot. It just isn't John Buscema, and I would have loved to see the whole book. It's the only shot in the book I think that isn't quite John. Oh. Then we go to page 4. And, this is just a fight page, but the guy, blasts out and he collapses, and Goliath has to come to the rescue, so he's jumping up. Just a nice dramatic shot. This is the John Buscema, by the way, still before he got Kirby eyes, before that Silver Surfer #4 experience, after which he decided to become a Kirby clone because that's what Stan seemed to want. At this stage, he's still drawing something. It's still got this his own kind of storytelling, which is influenced by Kirby, but he's not doing full-out Kirby, and this is the John Buscema I like the most.
Next page.
Yeah, I mean, nice little just passing shot. He annoys the neighbor. So obviously there must be somebody else in that apartment besides just superheroes living there. And so he comes in, he breaks through the window, just usual dramatic stuff and everything. And here's the Vision down, and not too much. And she's giving him a hard time, the Wasp, because she's still frustrated because he didn't propose. You got to write me a check for my window. Just just nonsense. Just crazy nonsense, but beautifully drawn.
Next page.
Next page is almost an unthinking parallel of the other page. Here's romantic stuff between the Black Widow, whom I was had kind of decided to write out of the Avengers for a while. Partly because she didn't have any superpowers. She looked pretty good, but she wasn't, going much of anywhere with it. So I decided, I just write her out for a while and see what happened. But it's just a page to take care of that little situation, and then Hawkeye is off to the races. I try to get you don't have room in a superhero book if you're the way I did it, usually for a lot of personal bits all the time, and I would try to do something or other with them every bit so that we remembered that they had a life outside. But the thing is, Hawkeye didn't have much of a life outside the Avengers, nor did Goliath or the Wasp, because this is the only book they regularly appeared in. It wasn't like Cap or Iron Man.
All right, next page.
Okay, then we get to the next character who was brought in a few issues before, the Panther. The interesting thing I noticed, I think this may be the first issue where Stan, I don't know why, I don't think I would have done it on my own, where I was able to start calling him the Black Panther again. When he first came in around issue 52, Stan insisted, first he changed the mask so that he wanted to make sure, since we're not going to see him with unmasking and masking all the time, he wanted to make sure, I think probably that people knew he was black. And then after a while he gave up on that, and he let us get back to the wonderful full mask, which was much better. And also, suddenly he refers to himself, the Black Panther, in the very first panel, and that's kind of a little switch because no more just the Panther. And of course, we're still some distance away from the Black Leopard too.
Next page.
And it's, by the way, it said he was some blocks north of Avengers Mansion. That was sort of the way of saying he was sort of in Harlem, basically walking around. So he interrupts this crime, and that's just, he knocks a few guys around. He's basically, super Batman type and so forth. But again, beautifully drawn by John.
That third panel with the feet coming through wow.
Yeah, John was
so impactful.
He wasn't like Kirby, but he was inventive in these small ways. He would come up with little things that, it was a panel you hadn't quite seen exactly that way before. It had the Kirby influence, but it wasn't just Kirby anymore. It was his own version of that.
Wow. All right, next page.
Okay, then we finally you notice that I think I must have had the top thought balloon in panel 2 lettered yellow because, something in that youngster's voice about wish we could use him on my block, because I'm stuck with the Black Panther away from Wakanda. What was he going to do? And I had to give him something. I'd already decided, I think, that he was going to become a teacher, because I knew a little about teacher. I thought, well, we could fake that through some way or other. And we get him involved in Harlem schools or something. Because I had to do something with him. I couldn't just have him hang around the mansion all the time. But and then of course we get to the scenes there where the Vision is being looked at by Hank Pym, and who doesn't really know his connection really with the Vision yet. But he and the Panther, being the two scientific minds there, the Panther recognizes too that the Vision, the character, Jan called him the Vision. He didn't have a name, but she called him the Vision, and so forth. And what's interesting is Goliath says, according to my examination, he's every inch a human being, except all his bodily organs are constructed of synthetic materials. That's why the insides of the Vision, as Neil drew him in an issue, was it 93 or whatever it was, 94?
Yeah.
Weren't really quite right, because it made him look too metallic. That wasn't the way I had seen the Vision. But Neil drew it so great as, human enough here, so let it go. But what I always meant was that if you had him, you were going to have a spleen and a heart and everything, but it would have made of artificial materials, the blood and everything else. But it would have looked more like a normal human being inside, and no robotic looking parts, was my original conception. I just let that go because, Neil drew this, and it sort of worked the other way too, so I figured nobody will remember that.
Oh, wow. Next page.
Oh, by the way, the preceding page where I made up that term synthezoid. I don't know where that came from. Not one of my better names, but it's not one of the worst either, I guess. Anyway, so here he is. Now, of course, we have to have the Vision prove he can fight the Avengers a little bit. I mean, somehow or other, fighting the Wasp and then fainting wasn't too much at the beginning. So he shows he's really strong. He can't just walk through walls and float in the air. He can pick up a heavy piece of machinery and throw it at Goliath. And so it takes a couple of Avengers or so, the Panther and the Black Panther, and Hawkeye, tackle.
Next page.
And of course, they get thrown off because Hawkeye and the Panther are not as strong as the Vision, and neither is Goliath, maybe. And anyway, so they grabbed him, and we suddenly realize the Vision doesn't really know quite why he's there. He's supposed to destroy them, but he doesn't quite know why or anything. It's obviously he has memory problems. Okay.
Next page.
Yeah. Then John did this thing. This is probably him again. Instead of just having him standing around talking, he goes off and sits in a chair, with his cape draped over it, and a couple panels, and holding his head in thought, and so forth. And right away, it's a little different view of the superhero than the usual thing. He's not facing like a defiant character. And because it was a 20-page story, and I was already up to page 12, and at that time, I was trying to get a whole story into one issue. This would have taken 5 issues today, to tell the story. Maybe they'd been better off. I don't know. And suddenly he remembers the character of Ultron 5, because, as you remember when Ultron was introduced, he was already had the number 5. He was already supposedly the 5th version of Ultron, and it was only later we stopped having the numbers with it. So, but the only thing I wish I had thought from the very beginning to do the thing that I did a relatively few issues later, which is start having squarish balloons or rectangular balloons as opposed to regular ones, as well as the italics, which I do have on the Vision. I wish I had thought to do that from the start, but it's a work in progress.
Okay. Next page.
Okay, so he's going to take him to. He's taking him to a subterranean stronghold, but I guess that's the ground there. So it doesn't look that subterranean to me. I don't know why they don't take a Quinjet, by contribution to aeronautics, it's an air cruiser, that's, anything. But anyway, so he ends up in this, below the street here, there's this gigantic headquarters that Ultron has. I mean, my God, this anteroom here with a couple of rockets is a couple 100 feet long. And takes up about 12 blocks below the streets of Harlem or wherever it is. South Bronx, I think I was actually sort of thinking of it.
Next page.
And then we get to Ultron, who's still in his first incarnation, where he looks like he's a muscular guy in a big suit and everything, and with that kind of buck-toothed robot look he had. And but basically, he now proceeds. I think of that line in the Age of Ultron movie. It was just Well, yes, I'm glad you asked that because I wanted to tell you about my brilliant plan. Well, he sits here and he tells about his brilliant plan. Maybe that's where Josh Whedon got it from. He didn't there and explain his plan that he had made him. He had programmed him collapse so that he'd be taken into Avengers headquarters. If he didn't destroy them, that he'd bring him back there without knowing that he was supposed to be doing it. So it was a lot of subliminal stuff, and I got that out of the way in 2 or 3 somewhat expository lines.
Roy, just really quick, the way Ultron is sitting right there, right in the middle of the page, that is with that shadow too, is so
In the first panel?
Oh God, it's so.
Yeah.
It has a strength to it. John didn't just have him, sitting there like a robot or standing, and I mean, why a robot has to sit, I'm not quite sure. But anyway, there he is, and all of a sudden now he attacks the Avengers, and Vision, of course, has no idea this was a trap because he was leading it too, because he still doesn't know much about. He only knows he has some connection to Ultron.
Next page.
Okay, just a nice big fight scene, and because you can't ever have too many giant robots. You'd think that he had him, maybe he didn't need the Vision, but here's a giant robot about as big as Goliath, and he's knocking him around, and he just kind of gets forgotten in a few pages when he gets knocked out. We never see him again. He was just there to have something for them to fight against, but Ultron tossed out. But, in a way, when you think about it, I think the idea underneath it was that Ultron could create robots to serve him, but, they didn't have any brains. They were just muscle. And the Vision was intended to be something else. That's sort of the idea I felt that Josh Whedon got across so well in the Ultron movie, too, is that, he was trying to create a life form that gave him more than just being a robot servant. And of course, he ended up giving him a little too much. You can't. It's the Frankenstein, story. You try to create something, and you create something, but then it has its own life, and that's what happened with the Vision. Except in this case, it was like the monster creating more of a human being than the human being created the monster.
Yeah.
Because the Vision is closer to human than Ultron is.
All right, next page.
Well, okay, just a big fight with a robot. And, excuse me. And now we have a weird thing. I just needed some time, and I wanted the Vision to be the guy to finish Ultron off. So I have the old the walls closing in thing from 5,000 movie serials, which this is a few years before George Lucas borrowed it, of course, in Star Wars. But it was the same thing. They're trapped, and since they are Hawkeye, the Wasp, and the Black Panther, they can't do much about it because they aren't really that powerful. The Vision can walk through the thing and so forth, but because it wasn't really designed for him.
All right, next page.
And so the Vision leaves, goes through. And that's the kind of drawing I guess Stan wanted you going through and had Marie replace that panel 3. But hey, there he is walking again. And I think Josh Whedon might have had that first panel we see of Ultron, panel 5 on the page in mind. Because wasn't there a shot or two of like Ultron kind of looking back over his shoulder at the readers? He wasn't just a robot face, he was sort of sly and coy and that kind of thing, and so forth. And I could easily retroactively put James Spader's voice in there, which was one of the great things about the film. And so now we suddenly have Ultron facing his. I had so much to explain that I have one of Vision's balloons in the last panel blotting out his pointing hand. I should have worked around that. I should have blotted out more of the machinery instead of his hand. But by the time it was done, by letterer Sam Rosen, it was too much trouble to change. It would have been a lot of work, so I let that go.
Next page.
Then we have, because the story's getting close to close, and everything, so I had to do this sucker off. John gave me a sort of a triptych here of 3 heads of Ultron, so I just gave each of them a line and everything. Then we get to fighting and so forth, and the funny thing is Ultron, he's created this character. He doesn't even know that much about him. He throws him in somewhere, and then he's startled. The guy gets out again. I don't know. This maybe Sometimes I think my concept in this thing was a little stronger than some of the actual writing and so forth. But the art kind of carried it off, and people liked it anyway.
Next page.
And then Ultron, because he is the world's stupidest master robot, I guess. He actually jumps at the Vision. He doesn't know the Vision could make himself insubstantial, so he goes through, and I guess he explodes and gets destroyed or something. And, it's really not much of a fight, but of course, you didn't want to have the Vision and Ultron really fight. I don't think that would work. I just wanted to kind of end it quickly. I had to end it quickly and maybe a little clumsily. But anyway, so then the other robot collapses, the walls start closing in, and everything's here except the evilly smiling head, as he says here. It must have been disintegrated, and so forth. And then we come to the one page that actually worked out better than I planned, as opposed to having to be carried by John's art, which was the last page.
Yeah, this one.
I did not have Percy Shelley's poem Ozymandias in mind when I did this page at all, when I did the plot. But I did describe it. I didn't describe the exact number of panels, but I said I want a multi-panel page in which we see the head lying there. A shadow comes over it, so if something's coming to it, what is it? It's the Avengers or whatever. No, it's this is the South Bronx. It's a black kid. And of course, he's wonderfully drawn like a real looking character for the time, because John Buscema had come in a couple of years earlier from advertising art. And, a lot of his early panels when he came in looked like Schwinn bicycle ads with the people, and when he wanted to draw a kid, it looked real,
yeah,
and so forth. And so I had him just tossing around. And then he, turns off the head and throws it away, and it's just lying there. When I got it, I'm trying to think, what, at first I think I might have thought that, maybe except for that first balloon that showed that the Avengers were underneath, that it was going to be just maybe a silent page or something, because Ultron's not going to say anything. If the kid said anything, he'd be talking to himself, and it would be a little clumsy in that case. Not that I was against clumsy writing, I did it all the time. But and then it suddenly occurred to me, not that I memorized it, but I knew the poem, of course, from, studying English. I kind of liked the Ozymandias poem. So I actually, what I did is, of course, when in the pencil, all those panels, they go all the way up, to fill, and so forth. It's up to me to decide where the balloons go in the borders. The borders would have just been filling it like regularly. And so I personally got the copy of the poem, and I lettered in upper and lower case. This isn't my lettering, that was straight. But I personally lettered exactly where they would go, to divide the poetry lines the way that he did. Like in the second panel too, who said is part of the same line with, for the next thing. So I had to sort of end it where I did and so forth. But I personally lettered it, and I took like a ruler and I went across, because we'd worked with the original art then. I wasn't working with photocopies or anything like that. I was working with the original art. So I just took, and took a ruler more or less and went across the page with a pencil and go all the way across to show where it's cut out. And I did that all the way down, because I felt it would have looked aesthetically unpleasing if say, panel 2 has a height here and the next one is a half an inch lower.
Oh,
and
right.
That's what the letterer would have done necessarily. If I didn't write this, the letterer wouldn't have cared. He would just put it down, and he wouldn't have thought about making the panels. He might have, but I couldn't count on him, so I had to make sure I did it. So I made sure that I did all the panels, because I wanted just that right,
wow,
kind of look. And so I was kind of pleased. And as opposed to the usual thing where there's a next issue or an end or something, I just kind of let it go, because the only thing, some people said, well, you didn't give credit to Shelley. I said, listen, if you don't know Ozymandias, I'm not gonna quote him now. I'll tell you later, or in the letters page or something like that. Just think Roy Thomas wrote that pretty. It's okay with me. And that was it. And I was amazed at the reaction it got, even among a lot of professionals. And one conversation I heard about was one person talking about how this was really great. It was kind of, not like a great advance, but just a nice little touch that showed the comics to be, a little more than
sophisticated.
And it wasn't just another version of Stan Lee this time. It was a little different from what Stan would have done, even though, he could have done something like that. We would have got the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam if he had done it, or something, and which is fine. But in this case, we got Ozymandias, and then somebody else said, Eisner did that stuff all the time. Well, Eisner did something like this, but I looked back, and he made up a couple of poems. We never really quoted classical poetry and had that as the end of the story. So, I felt like it's, not everything that was ever creative in comics was done by Will Eisner first or Harvey Kurtzman. He made out little minor innovations anyway, but it was kind of nice. And it's one of these, it's the most memorable panel at the page in the book, although that it competes with that wonderful splash page and, of course, the cover.
Wow.
And that's the end of that.
Next page.
And, well, of course, there's the cover.
Yeah.
And so forth. Once again, shows the dearth of women.
Nope, 58. 58.
58, yeah.
I thought he wanted to go back to the cover.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah. Well, I mentioned before about Stan probably had the idea for the knockout red, which I think is we call it a knockout. It's not all red, but, it's red and the pinkish variations of it. I don't know why Stan did that exactly. which is kind of funny when he gave me all this trouble about having the red face. He said, people aren't, I remember the little conversations, people aren't going to like this android having this red face after I explained to him why I didn't have the other colors. And he said,
I always loved the overly dramatic hands of the characters.
Yes.
Yes, it's a wonderful pose. It shows that he had that and holding that cape. It showed this gracefulness, which was, different from, Captain America. You could see Thor doing that, but he would have an even more feeling of power. This is as much grace as it is power. And it just showed that John had an instinctive understanding. He wasn't curvy and he, wasn't, go straight. But at his best, he was just incomparable. Not Neil Adams or anybody else could really ever be much better than that.
Oh,
I think this is one of the most powerful comic book covers of all time. I mean, this was just.
Easy.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Do you think it would have been as good if it had been naturally colored?
I don't think so. There's something just so dynamic about this that I'd have to imagine at the time. Like, I know for me, if I saw this cover on the shelf, not knowing what it was, I would just gravitate right to it. Right away.
I mean, I can't even imagine going by a newsstand and seeing this comic on the. I mean, would you buy anything else that month?
I wonder, has anybody ever colored it naturally? I sort of wonder what it would look like colored, naturally. Probably, at this stage, we'd say, it wouldn't be as effective. At the time,
there is.
I think it was just an example of Stan wasn't a bad editor. He saw that would be just like that one X-Men cover where, where Magneto had knocked them all the X-Men are lying around. He made that a knockout cover. I mean, he just had, good instincts about this. It wasn't me. It wasn't John. It wasn't Martin Goodman. It was all Stan.
Wow.
Brian Sarton says, much more striking with all the shades of red.
Yeah, and you would figure, just really quickly, the lettering is red, too, and it has the white line. You would think there would be too much red, but it is so, for some reason, it's so perfect. You know what I mean?
I was thinking about that, just looking at it now, that even if I'd had that idea, I thought, well, maybe I should make the logo a different color to stand out, because Goodman, they like the lettering to be, the logo to be a little different coloring. But Stan actually even did that. He had the nice instinct. You're going to go red, do it all the way.
Yeah, and even the letter, even the blocks, even like the face fonts.
Everything was red. Yeah, it's all red all the time.
Incredible.
Wow.
Love it. All right, let's jump to 58.
Yeah, the cover, again, shows the dearth of women. The Vision's relegated in the background this time, but nice pose and shot of all the characters, which is, all it was. But at least it shows, hey, I got Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man here. And I only got the new character of the Vision, but I managed to yank in the other characters for one issue before Stan would make me throw them out again.
Okay, first page. Oh, now here we go.
This is something relatively unusual for me because, and for Marvel at the time, very rarely, maybe Jim Stryker could do it because he was writer and penciler, but very rarely did I or Stan or anybody ever make up a title to a story in those days, since we were doing that Marvel-style plot first thing, before we saw the lettering. And this could have been done too. It could have just been a shot of the Panther crawling over a wall and a blank wall, and then I had the letterer put in this. But no, I gave him the title. I knew that was in the last panel. I mean, and so forth. So I really gave away the last panel, although people would kind of forget by then, and so forth. Even an android contrived, which kind of. And then I, made the whole story lead up to that particular moment. I don't know why, because I didn't do it that often. Like a few issues earlier, when I had some lettering, "Death Be Not Proud" on that stone bridge.
Oh yeah.
And so, which was a nice shot. Which was, the influence of Stranko, not so much Stranko, but the kind of influence that Stranko was doing too, which was Eisner and that kind of thing. That this was, more of an Eisner issue kind of thing. But, we were just looking for something to be a little different. Stan had given us the go ahead to be a little more inventive with things, and this was just one way I did it. And now Stan hadn't liked my title. Boy, I'm in bad shape when it's all letter and ink by the time he sees it, because he wasn't he probably saw the pencils. There's a shot John and I were just looking at before we came on in this trade paperback and I guess hardcover books Marvel's put out. There's a photograph of somebody looking at the pencil, so it's nice that the pencils are kind of preserved. We're looking over the shoulder of somebody who's looking at the pencils, because I carried them with me. God, if I'd lost them, what would have happened? We really didn't have a photocopier back then. And I carried them with me to the Gateway Convention in St. Louis, and didn't come back for an extra day or two because I decided to elope. Well, because I was in St. Louis, I may as well elope with my girlfriend. And
so while he was eloping,
and I was carrying around this beautiful artwork and so forth, and passing around the convention, and there's a picture of a guy holding this the pencil version, which you can plainly see the title's already on there. So
isn't that great? And Steve and Nile, I want you to know, the very first time I ever saw Black Panther, I opened up the paperback, and that was the first picture I ever saw, and I fell in love with the Black Panther because I never saw him before, but that was the first image I ever saw of the Black Panther.
George Klein was a kind of underrated inker, but he had that kind of acidity look that we were coming for and so forth. And of course, he's the guy that Stan picked out, maybe for that reason. I don't know if to FF number 1 and 2, as it turned out. We learned later. I didn't know that then, or I would have asked him, "Did you do this?" But I'm kind of curious if it was. I guess it was he who must have decided to put whatever that stipple effect or something in the background. Because ordinarily we'd have just had a color there. But we didn't have to have a color in the background because he's got that, whatever you call it, it's stipple effect or whatever, just a lot of little dots, almost a pointillism or something there. And that's kind of nice because then you don't have to have blue in the background or purple or, for a night scene. It's just black with little white dots and the black buildings and so forth. And something's shining a light on a yellow building in the foreground, but you got to take a little artistic license. But that's a beautiful splash with 2 in a row. That's pretty good.
You're great. Yeah. Next page.
Okay. Well, this of course, is a nice shot because I got to bring these guys in. I thought this is an excuse to bring them in. They got to meet the new Avenger, or not the new Avenger, but the new guy who's hanging around with them, the Vision. And so here's the Panther. Of course, he'd already met him, but what he discovered is there's Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man. And I got my wish. I got I am missing a woman or two I could have brought in here, but and the Wasp doesn't even have much of a costume there, the little muffs around her shoulders, but just a powerful shot of. And again, here's Thor too holding his cape. These guys are all swishing these capes around,
Yeah, but we mustn't forget that beautiful wording right there. By the crags of Kilimanjaro.
Maybe I swiped that from Hemingway. I don't know.
That's magnificent.
Oh, I don't know. It's just a stupid thing. I had to have him. Everybody had to have their little catchphrase. I don't think I made that a regular when I just used it that once.
That's fantastic. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I noticed it the other night that I forgot to. I don't know. Well, everybody's got to swear by something, I guess. Yeah.
Next page now.
There's the Vision holding his little cape again, wonderful. Even the first panel speaks for itself how nice that is. But then look at that second panel. Instead of just being a panel, John's made a design on it. He's got this striped background to it, which is totally unrealistic. It's black and white stripes, which became black and green with the coloring. But it's just a design thing. This is, again, John in his pre-Kirby clone stage. He wouldn't have done this after Silver Surfer number 4, because Jack wouldn't do it. So so John said, Stan wants me to be a Kirby clone. I'll be a Kirby clone, or where's that thing? And then, of course, otherwise you just got the nice shot. Here's another shot echoing the one in the preceding issue of the Vision kind of sitting around thinking and, shows he's a little different kind of hero. He's kind of thoughtful android here.
But look at the grace, though, like in the first panel and in that last panel, but just the way they're like, there's like a shape, there's like a beautiful shape to them and a comfortable, like he's so comfortable. Like, oh, God.
Yeah, and the Vision just stands out. He's a little different from all the other characters. He's muscular, but he, and that's why, I forget the actor's name, it was such a wonderful choice to play him with the voice.
Oh, Bethany?
Yeah, Bethany. Yeah, right. Just it's just good because he's not a muscle man. He's not Chris Hemsworth or Chris Evans. Who looks like a kind of a physical type because he's not a physical type. He was playing a voice of Jarvis Machine, before. Yeah. And but it fit the Vision because you didn't need a muscle man. You just need a guy built well enough, but you didn't need a muscle man for that time. That's why I hated one thing in the WandaVision show when the only time they ever showed the real Vision costume, they make a parody of it with moose sharks like as a Halloween costume. That bugged me. I said, that's a nice costume. I'd like to see the actual Vision in it sometime.
Yeah.
Next page.
Well, then this is just another little thing to get to. Cap, Iron Man, and Thor haven't had a chance to tangle with Vision. We have to have one of that. So, Cap goes roaring through him, and now Iron Man's going to go on there. But again, the drawings are good. They're not just, Kirby. They're Kirby-esque, and yet they've got that different kind of more realistic anatomy and so forth that John could give it. And the crisp thinking of George Klein really ties it all together. It's almost like having Joe Sinnott, which would have been the ideal.
Next page.
All right, then, Goliath slams, breaks. They have to, would you like to skip the page? Oh, yeah. Oh, this is, the shot here. Iron Man's repulsor rays goes right through him because the guy can go back and forth. I don't know if people ever understood that in the movie because they would have him go back and forth being super hard and super, ethereal. And that's how he'd fight, like in the Captain America Civil War thing, you going back and forth. But I don't know if they ever explained it. If people had to pick it up. And here he is a second later picking up Iron Man. Of course, I managed to have Iron Man say a couple of dozen words before he gets picked up saying "Holy Hannah." And then, of course, that makes Thor mad. And now he's worked his way up from Captain America, the weakest of the three, to Iron Man, who's pretty strong. But now he faces Thor.
Oh, awesome! And Steve, I gotta throw. This is something that I always remember too. When Iron Man gets caught by Thor, and he says, "I never forgot this. I can take care of myself, mother hen." I love that. When I was a kid, I loved that. I always remembered that line. Yeah. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, Tony's got a lot of pride, so he was.
I stole that from Shelly too.
Next page.
Okay, then we have a kind of a weird thing. The reddish Vision and the bluish Thor kind of fighting for a panel and the way. And again, I start. As I look through it now, because it's the wonderful John just did the drawing and everything else, and otherwise it's just a page kind of getting to the end. So we see that Thor is stronger than the Vision. But the Vision might have found a way to fight him because he becomes so hard. But at this point, it's time to break it up. We've had enough obligatory fight scenes now. But again, you see these weird design elements. I don't think it works so well on the preceding page in one or two places, but here you've got that. Look at all that wiry design that
on the third panel.
On the third panel. Which, probably George put in, on his own, because I don't think that would have been there in the pencils, and we wouldn't have told to bring it in. We get it in, we just have this weird design, and then all the horizontal lines in the last panel, just little design elements that John tossed in to keep from just having either blank backgrounds or having to draw a whole machine.
Wow.
I tell you what, though, I love your wording here, Roy, because, obviously, Thor's speaking. And then he says, if you go back to that other page, if you go back a little bit quickly, and he says, by condensing my mass, to my utmost, I might even be your superior. And then it says, android, that you might. And this is what I love. On the day that the lion falls to the jackal. It's just little things like that they can't do anymore. I'm not lying. That is genius. I love it. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. I'm just so good. Trying to be a little colorful, but it had to be a way that Thor would express himself and so forth. And Shakespeare or something could have done that. So that was that kind of talk. But it was kind of funny because the thing is, you get the artist through all the work of the plot, and you don't have to explain. Sometimes I maybe did too much, but explain too much what's going on. But you can play around with the words and just try to put good words. That's what I learned from Stan, and sometimes I can come up with stuff like that myself. Then we're on the next page.
Yeah, that's what he asked.
Okay. Goliath manages to break a table. No wonder Tony Stark complained in the movies about how he paid all the bills. There'd be a lot of. Here's the Vision thinking around again, looking like a Rodin statue, and probably in panel 2. And again, if Thor can't just read something, he has to get all the annals of the hero to assemble. He has to get a whole parchment like he's or something like this. But again, that's I don't know if how closely I dictated, whether he's just talking, is he reading it all, but for some reason I decided that I wanted a page that had anybody who had ever been with the Avengers, including Spider-Man, who wasn't really ever quite one, but almost became one. So the next page, for no particular story reason at all, just because I wanted a good pin-up, and I thought it'd be kind of nice to have him draw everybody, a couple of them back there, the women and Quicksilver, were a little crowded, but I wanted everybody who had ever been an Avenger and Spider-Man, who almost became one, too. Now, if you had a picture like this, you'd have about 300 people in there. You wouldn't be able to tell them but at that time, only a dozen people or so had ever been Avengers. It's by this first 5-year point.
Oh, so good.
That's a beautiful drawing.
Love that.
You could just give John a thing to do it, and he'd give you a beautiful pin-up, and it would not look exactly like another pin-up. It'd have its own little feel.
Just as a side note, when I was in the army, I had that blown up, photocopied, and put on my wall by my wall space.
Oh,
people would come by every day looking at it going, wow, who are they? And I'd have to keep explaining who these characters were like almost every day. It's a beautiful.
You tore out that beautiful page?
No. I got a photocopy of it done.
Oh, a photocopy. Okay.
And then if I tore that,
you probably had a photocopier before we did.
Next page.
Okay. Now this is another. Here's you got John again doing his thing with his 3 heads. Only this time it's not just 3 heads like last time, 3 heads of Ultron. This time it's like coming closer, and then the colorist kind of picks up on it and goes with the coloring. But otherwise, now we get into a thing that I decided to do kind of consciously. Well, is to after all the exposition in panel 1, I had designed the thing. I was going to do 3 mini flashbacks, and each one takes place before the other. So that each time we're a little further into the past of what's going on. This is the first one, which shows the creation of the Vision by Ultron, which gives us a little background to what he wanted, what his powers are, and why he did it, and just how he's controlling. And we see the fulmination of that, of course, is on the next page.
Next page. Okay.
And this is more, and again, the Vision looks, kind of tortured, and everything. He's, got that, you see his powers, but just wonderful drawing, and Ultron, he didn't just stand there like a robot. He contorts himself, like some grungy character here. But anyway, but this is the first of the flashbacks, which is most recent. This is just like, a couple of days before or something like that,
Next page.
Then here's the Vision holding up again, and the colorist nicely, I don't know who it was, Marie, I don't know, could have been whoever. But anyway, the Vision is colored. The others are done in a knockout or whatever. So just kind of frame the Vision, just nice little touch, but not much. They're just talking around here, and now we suddenly get Giant Man or Goliath realizes that he's got some connection. He just realized I don't know whatever happened to this one experiment of mine that where I was working on something a little like this. And, it's funny, I can't remember. So instead of they're going off in Quinjet or something, this time Thor decides to just take them all there with his hammer, which made a nice little extra visual. I don't think Thor did that often. Again, it might have been my idea, it might have been John's, but it's a nice little touch.
Next page.
So now they arrive there. Here's his house out in the suburbs, and you got the thing and so forth. And now we go into the second flashback, which takes place, I don't know, a few weeks or whatever earlier, which is Hank Pym creating this thing that will turn out to be Ultron. And of course, it couldn't be Hank Pym in the movie because Hank Pym hadn't been in the movie yet. This is before the Ant-Man movie, but so they had to change it to Tony Stark, which was probably the best choice they could have made under the circumstances.
Oh, next page.
Yeah. And here we see this weird thing. I decided that I wanted to have this. I wanted to show the childhood of Ultron, which was my little Frankenstein monster. He's all growing up, so they grow up so fast. I think that was right. I almost use that line. They grow up so fast. But instead of saying that, I just showed it. He starts off calling him Dada, which is baby talk, and then by the second panel, it's Daddy. He's aging fast. Which is like what. Like the movie Ultron 2, that he starts off and then he just gradually gets more and more sophisticated very quickly.
Right.
Then he's saying Dad, which is a little more sophisticated than Daddy, and so forth. And by the end, it's Father Dear, all in one page. It's a little quick because we had 20-page stories, and again, I could have taken 3 issues with this today, but
yeah, I just love that drawing of the baby Ultron. I've always loved that little drawing.
Well, that's why he was Ultron 5. This is Ultron 1. I guess he tried 3 or 4 others in between. We just see the story of that. I could come back now and do the story of Ultron 2, 3, and 4, and what he did before he made up the Vision. That would be a fun thing to do. If they asked me to do Avengers, maybe I can do the story of Ultron 2, 3, and 4 or something. Wow. This was Ultron 1, although he didn't name him. I guess Ultron named himself. Anyway.
Next page.
I did get a little expository to explain the thing a little bit in a thought, but you could think in a second. So that all that exposition, there was a lot of exposition, but you can have all those thoughts in like an instant. If I had you saying it, it would have been more artificial. And then I'm having still calling him a father, and they're fighting, but of course, Goliath is big, but he's just pure brawn, so he's already created somebody who can knock him around. So that's that page. Again, I didn't have much room for any of these flashbacks, but so now I've gone back and I've shown the origin of Ultron even before he had a name.
Next page.
And so here he is, not worthy of my consummate genius. He's already decided he's better than his creator, and so he busts out, just like these people outside see what looks like a human vacuum cleaner, come charge through the wall, and Goliath doesn't remember a thing. So I don't know what happened, so that takes care of that.
Next page.
And a little aftermath of that, and he's just sitting there in this, cheek on his hand, saying, "Well, I've had it with Suburbia," So he abandons that place, and that's why he doesn't remember it until they read it. And there's a mention of a Frankenstein monster. It was being too subtle. I figured the reader would be thinking that anyway. And then I decided, where did he get it? Where did maybe there was some basis, for the mind of, I don't know, there wouldn't have to be, I guess, but so I made up. So I said it would be. I made up the idea that it was the basic mind below was the mind of Wonder Man, who of course was this character appearing. What was it in 9th issue of Avengers? It says,
yeah.
He was by Stan and Don Heck, and he was just a guy who came in to join the Avengers and betrayed them, and then he dies at the end. I think because they were afraid otherwise DC would get mad because they had Wonder Woman, and so forth. I don't know. That's what I heard, but I don't know why. But anyway, so I have a third flashback, and this, this is the end of that flashback. This is the third one then. And, this goes back, several years or a few months, depending on how you want to count Marvel time or comic time. But I just thought it'd be kind of interesting that, each flashback is further back than the other one. You're constantly peeling away layers. I wish I had more pages. I could have maybe done it a little more sophisticated,
Wow. Next page?
Next page is just, winding up business. And interesting, that weird little cameo in panel 3, the little cameo feel around there. John, another one. Oh, did I skip right here? Right here. Oh, I'm sorry. My fingers are sticky. Yeah, I was wondering. I thought that was kind of abrupt. So, yeah, because this is just all it really is a better, not that Don Heck wasn't a good artist, but a better drawn version of some of the events from Avengers number 9. This time drawn by, but because that had been a long time ago and people wouldn't have seen it. A lot of people came in, as Marvel got more popular. A lot of people who saw Avengers 9, it wasn't just that I wanted to tell the story. A lot of people wouldn't have seen Avengers number 9. It wasn't the same audience. There were a lot of people that had joined since then. A few had left. So I decided, I'll just tell the story over again with Baron Zemo and Wonder Man, and then get over to the next page, page 18, where where he dies at the end and so forth, and perhaps he'll live again one day in another form and so forth. And then,
I just want to point out the very last panel of Thor. Look at how graceful that drawing is of the way how it's spread out. Now that is so. Oh, I love that panel. That's John Buscema at his finest.
Yeah, it's a small throwaway panel. It's not a big grandiose shot,
And it's so beautiful. Like he's so floating on air.
And even the Vision was right. You see the Vision. That unlike the other guy, their hands are right down at their side. They're just coming along. If you saw them, their hands would be down at their side and they'd be just drifting up with Thor pulling them up.
Wow. Next page?
Yeah, Prime didn't get to this page. And then we finally get to the other, very quickly, the Vision. They decided to trust the Vision. He becomes an Avenger. So they, and they got several people did it right, and from time to time over the years would like this thing. Is a man any less human because he has an artificial leg, a transplanted heart? The 5 original Avengers included an Asgardian immortal and a green-skinned, tormented behemoth. We ask merely a man's worth, not the accident of his condition. So, we even let a Methuselah-like cat join. Eddie's mostly, I got to understand this kind of stuff, but there's kind of. I wanted to get this feeling, that it was a way of tying the Vision into, the handicapped people, and a little bit of everything, because you remember the Frankenstein monster himself. He feels like he's this abandoned orphan and so forth, and that's the kind of feeling I was trying to get from the Vision. He was sort of Frankenstein as a superhero, while in a way, the Ultron was Frankenstein as the inventor, and so forth, except this time the inventor was evil, and the creation was good. And that's what I think Josh Whedon saw in it, which is why he insisted on doing Ultron, the Vision, in the second, film, bless his heart. And then he walks off and, and so forth. And
next page.
Iron Man doesn't quite realize why, but Captain America, because or is it? No, that's not Captain America. That's Giant Man.
Right.
Tom. It is proper that Giant Man or Goliath have the last word, because he is, after all, his grandfather in a sense.
Yeah.
And even an android can cry. And I just told John, make the last page a full page shot of the Vision with a tear. And of course, John, because he was John, he has these expressive fingers up to the side of the head. He's not just standing there with a tear, and it's not just a close-up. He's standing there, and the fingers have their own life and so forth. And he looks powerful, but so sensitive,
Steve, one of the greatest in Nile, one of the greatest splash pages in the history of comic book.
Oh, Definitely.
Love
I
it.
think anyone from the 1960s will laud that page forever. And if there is any hardcover books or anyone writes anything about 60s comics, that page is usually reprinted, represented in there somewhere.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
It's kind of interesting. For 2 issues in a row, I mean, obviously John drew the Nile worlds to come up with the ideas, but I didn't just leave it all to him. I didn't even generalize. It's interesting. I came up with a good, idea for a splash page for the first one, the Vision floating up, and John did much better than I could have imagined it. And then by the end of the page, it became the Ozymandias page, which would have had some power without that. And then the splash page, the second, is that even the android can cry, gives away the whole ending without anybody paying attention because everybody's just looking at Black Panther and it's beautiful drawing, and then the end here. So, somehow the beginning and ending of the stories are so two most famous and the most powerful pages, important pages. So don't always manage to do that. You can't do it every time. In this case, I think we had a regular bookends kind of story, and it kind of worked out. Couldn't do that every month, but this month, despite all the other flaws or expository writing or whatever, I think it was fairly effective. And without John DeSimba, or somebody of that caliber.
And I'd just like to point out, how many people have come up to Roy and me and say that how that panel changed their lives? Oh my God, how many people have said that? Remember we were in Seattle? Yeah. The guy said, when I saw that panel, my whole life of how he felt, it was all talked about, was just all shown in that page. And that was the first issue that he ever got when he was a kid.
And now he's out on the road.
Yeah.
So now, what do you got to say?
Yeah, I mean, well, first off, what's really cool is I was able to find a cover of 57 that was colored differently. And it looks like it's obviously a foreign copy, but you do see it here.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never seen that before. I have to get a copy of that. What do you know what language it is? Maybe I can find it for all.
Is that German?
It looks like German.
I can't
German.
read it here. That's not that big on the screen. I have to look around and see if I can find it. I have to know a couple of people.
Yeah, because I think
I want to see what that looks like. What do you think of it compared to the other? Still
I
good.
prefer the red. It's still good. But the red cover stands out much more.
The red.
A bit cynical, and it just kind of grabs you.
Certainly made it more unique.
Yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say the red, because the red gives it a touch of mystery too. Like, there's like what are you thinking, Steve? See, something's going on in your head there. What?
No, I was going to say, it's a hard thing for us to do because we've always seen the red cover.
Yeah.
In our minds, that's the law.
Red, still is red.
Yeah.
I'll go red all the way.
The test of that would be showing brand new people both covers and saying, which one do you like?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could have been Maurice Evans or somebody's idea to do it, but I suspect it was Stan. Covers like that that kind of idea usually came from Stan. They may have shown him, one with regular coloring, and that's how I know that's what happened to the extent cover I was talking about. Of course, somebody had colored it. This looks like a mishmash, so let's just color it all red. In this case, I don't know, but I suspect it was probably Stan. I know it wasn't me.
Hey, John, do you have anything near the mic of your phone?
Anything near the mic? No.
Yeah, all of a sudden your guys' voices went like tunnel.
Are we sounding okay now?
We can understand what you're saying. It changed. I don't know if maybe the book or something slid near the phone or anything of that nature.
It's leaning up against the phone, but nothing's moved. We haven't hit the pillows and sitting on our high-tech arrangement here, but we haven't done any. Nobody's touched anything. Yeah.
Well, we're close to
back home again.
Oh, you're almost.
Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Oh, okay, send your private jet next time. I'll fly up there. We'll
Will do.
So, is there maybe we could get some questions? Is there some questions that?
Hey, we finished it in an hour. That was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There were
While
some
we're
stuff
waiting for questions, I
through.
just have to say, because obviously Roy isn't going to say this, but I have to say it. It's this type of story, this type of quality, and this type of emotional punch that separated Marvel from DC at the time. If you were a DC fan and you were over at DC reading, you didn't get any of the depth that's in this issue. And by this time, with writing like this and art like this, Marvel was separating itself from DC by the mile, and I'm sure even the hardcore most DC fan in the world would agree that nothing over at DC at that time could match this.
Agreed.
You haven't met all those hardcore DC fans, but I do think that about a year earlier, I think that the work Neil was doing on Dead Man, a kind of approach this. He could do it, but almost nobody else that's why we wanted him at Marvel, because everything, because he was the one guy over there. I mean, there are other good artists, Kubrick and others, but he was the one guy over there could bring that kind of thing, and we didn't want him bringing it to. We didn't like him bringing it to DC.
And we got a good question here. This is from James Sanchez. It says, Roy, was it a coincidence that Red Tornado and Vision came out at about the same time?
Yes, absolutely. Now Squadron Sinister and Captain America. And one of the Justice Leaguers having a garbage can for a trash leader. That was not. But this was. But people assume that. I think maybe the Red Tornado story came maybe a month first or so, which shows it wasn't coordinated. Otherwise, we would have come closer. Len Wein just came up with the idea of making a real character out of the humorous Red Tornado of the 40s, made up a new character for his own reason, and made him an android. I mean, it's really weird. Len was his own Stanley and Roy Thomas there. He had Dylan, who was good, who wasn't Buscema, but that was a good story. But there was absolutely no coincidence. Len and I never had any discussion about it. Later on, we might have noticed that people pointed out right away, and I can see why they thought that. But there's absolutely not even any subliminal, like you might argue about Man Thing, Swamp Thing, because Jerry Conway and Len were roommates when some of that stuff was being done and everything. But in this case, Len and I, we didn't talk to each other much. He wasn't working for Marvel yet, particularly, or anything like that. I didn't know him well, and it's just a total coincidence. It's weird, but I can see where people thought it was kind of a little in-joke, but it really was not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's important information for people to know now, because there may have been some speculation for a long time, but now you've put that to bed right now in this show.
I could be lying, I've been accused of lying about making up Stan's plot or helping him make up the plot for the Fantastic Four #1 or this or that, and so forth. But unless that's it, Len isn't around, so we can ask him more. But he and I discussed it once or twice. But we couldn't even figure out there was any place it could have been subliminal because we had so little contact at that time. I mean, I knew him, but that was about it.
Yeah.
And we just like to tell people that we're going to have Roy back on to do a lot of these little discussions with some of his classic issues, and we got some other ones going to be coming up, and we'll be doing it live too. So this is just the first time, and we thought people would enjoy the perspective from Roy because, me and Steve, and even now we can throw our little fanboyisms in there, but it's great to get it from the true source because let's be honest, a lot of these guys are not with us anymore. And Roy's still here, pounding through, and
so for a few minutes here. No, it's weird, but it's not that my perspective or Stan's or John's way is necessarily the only valid one because I could have something could be done subliminally or by mistake, or you do something you don't recognize it. If we could show anything that, for example, where Len and I could have influenced each other, then at least it would become a possibility. We thought, well, maybe we subconsciously. And everything, but in this particular case, it's almost impossible. But you can see where people thought it. The only time I get angry was when some little guy, sitting there in front of his computer comes up about, well, of course they did this and so forth. Because there's nothing more sure and certain and cocksure than some guy sitting there in his underwear at 4 a.m. typing out on his computer. That you can't beat that for authenticity and for clarity of thought.
I think Roy. Have you ever revealed before that it was Stan that said he wanted an android, or was that brand new?
Oh yeah, I mentioned that a number of times. Yeah, I always said whatever. It's just people start thinking about the vision. They don't maybe see that part, but I've mentioned that in print a number of times and everything because I just never would have done it and claimed I didn't. And I also always mentioned though he didn't tell me why or what I should do with it. I guess if he figured I'd had 3 years under him, I didn't know what to do by this point. He needed to, hire Denny O'Neil back or something.
All right, we got another question here. We got from Henry Jermick. Roy, is it true that you pulled strings, quote, to keep John Buscema on the Avengers?
I had no strings to pull. What strings was I supposed to pull? I mean, Stan was 6'1" or 2". I'm 5'4". He's the editor of the company. I'm the associate editor. He's got a big office. I got a little tiny desk and a typewriter. I had no string. When Stan decided, he was always yanking John away. Just a few issues later, right after the Man-Ape story, all of a sudden I walk in one day and says, I decided I need John for whatever project. Maybe it was the Silver Surfer. He was doing some stuff, so with him. But because he knew I was going to object, however weakly and politely, Stan did not like arguing with underlings. And his temper came out quite quickly. If he had what he thought was a profound thought, and you argued with it, he was real big on that. He could accept a polite suggestion, but he didn't want to. But the second time, it got too annoying. But and I knew that. So, but I was voicing some sort of thing. Well, what am I supposed to do? I mean, and everything. I could have, Don Heck was around, and that would have been a fight. I'd work with him. But John Buscema was just so great. And over the last year, we had just finished a nice run of books, bringing in the Man-Ape. We'd had the Yellow Jacket stuff, the Vision, Ultron, and so forth. But he said, but I've got a good replacement, Gene Colan. Well, actually, Gene Colan wasn't a good replacement because he was a wonderful artist, and I liked working with him, but he really wasn't a good artist for a superhero group. It just wasn't his thing. And he did it well, and, I enjoyed working with him, but in 3 issues, both he and I and Stan all saw it really wasn't working out that well. And then I inherited Barry Smith, who had a lot of creativity, even though his drawing wasn't as good. And then Sal came in doing his he was imitating the pre-Kirby John Buscema for a while, and so forth. We had a lot more, style than he, more less generic style and so forth. I think
the issue where Sal comes in on issue 68 again in Ultron is some of the finest art that Sal ever did, and there's sequences in that book, and I've mentioned it to many people before. Maybe James Cameron saw those sequences because it just looks like the Terminator.
Yeah.
Exactly the same.
Yeah. Well, I was so pleased because there had been a robot that Bob Powell drew in a story done by the company Magazine Enterprises, Ben Sullivan's little company that had Ghost Rider and Tim Holt and a bunch of things. And he had done a story with a robot that didn't have the same head as Ultron, but it had the body. And I sent him my copy of that old 1954-55 comic and said, this is what I want the body of Ultron to look like. So it doesn't look like there's a man inside an iron suit, like Iron Man is. I want it to look like you can't fit a body inside the arms and legs with that kind of those cables. You can see the cables kind of going back and forth. That's how he twists. And it was a really beautiful design by
I love that. I didn't know that. So that
Well, look up the book, The Avenger, in the Grand Comic Database. It's it only ran about 4 issues, and one of the covers and then one of the stories inside. On Alter Ego, we changed that robot figure into Daredevil because Avenger looked so much like Daredevil, had a red costume,
right?
But because because he just felt like that robot belonged at Marvel. But by that time, of course, I'd already brought him to Marvel. And, I didn't know how to design a robot, but Bob Powell did. So and Sal Buscema adapted it beautifully to the Ultron, and it became Ultron 6.
Beautiful.
Wow.
Barry would have had the same assignment, but he had left. I don't remember why Barry left, but it's just a case of. But I lost John Buscema, and I always wanted him back. Luckily, within a few months, I got him back, and Tom Palmer coming along with him, since unfortunately George Klein had passed away by that time. But it was I had a lot of good artists, but John Buscema was the best. But I had 4 or 5 really good artists all that time, and with Don Heck waiting in the wings, who was also a very good artist.
And before we end, let's just say, because Roy just mentioned somebody, because Mr. Tom Palmer just passed away. Can you give some words about Tom?
Yeah, it was a shock to me. I never knew Tom that well. I'd run into him in the last couple of years and everything. And there's a nice picture of the two of us I was really pleased to have after all these years. But it's kind of strange because Alex Brand and Jim Thompson, who had done this article on the interview on the black superheroes a few issues ago for Alter Ego, had come to me and said, hey, I have an interview with Tom Palmer. I've been trying to get an interview with Tom Palmer for most of the life of Alter Ego, the last 20 years. But I don't mind saying it. I wouldn't have said if Tom was alive, but it's kind of funny. He was working still at this age, one of the older inkers working, but he would never do an interview for Alter Ego because he said, told me once, I said, I knew you were going to ask me sooner or later. And this was sooner. He said, but I don't want people to know how old I am. I don't want them to be paying attention that I was back here drawing in the 60s, and early and everything, and I said, well, the comics are being reprinted from time to time and so forth. And his son, I think, was working in the street, so they knew he wasn't 10 years old. But so I just gave up. I never asked him again, but I was always frustrated. And then all of a sudden, these other two guys, Grand and Thompson, show up, and they have this interview with Tom Palmer, and I said, well, you think you won't mind? I mean, they have the rights to it, but I wouldn't want to use it without his permission. Oh, no, Tom wants it to be for you. So Tom had kind of, remembered that I wanted it, and suddenly, without my asking for the last 10 years, suddenly, he fixed it. It was just unfortunate. I did not know that he had cancer or his health. I talked to Alex, and he didn't either. They didn't, they knew he had a few little health problems, but they didn't know he was so ill. And so forth. And he had just talked to him on the phone a few days before, and he knew he wasn't real well, but he was kind of keeping that secret too. People always keep things secret. Gil Kane didn't want to tell me about his cancer years ago. He was afraid somebody would let it slip, and the companies would take him off an assignment, because they'd be afraid he'd die in the middle of it or something, and so forth. And so maybe it's paranoia, maybe it's just common sense. I don't know, but I was really devastated to hear it, and of course the fact that he's 81 years old didn't help because that's exactly my age. So we got another 20 years on you, Roy. You kidding?
Yeah. We got to get episode 1000, and then we make time off.
Yeah.
We got one good question left. I think we should get to before you guys wrap. This is from North Free. It says, Roy, what place in your heart do you hold Vision among all your great creations / co-creations? One of your favorites. Thanks for the personal story time.
The Vision's probably, one of my very favorites. I mean, Red Sonja's, has a certain place because, the coming out of the Howard thing, but that's co-created with Howard on top of everything else. But the Vision is kind of a co-creation with also John, but to a certain extent with Stan and Jack. So but I would say of all the characters that I made up or helped make up for Marvel, and of the ones that I wrote, as opposed to Wolverine's sort of important, but I never wrote Wolverine, so it didn't mean that much to me. But of the characters I wrote, the Vision, and as a villain, Ultron, had a very special place in my heart, which is why I came back to Ultron at least once. And I probably would have kept coming to him again, but I had to wait till the 90s when I was writing Avengers West Coast to get a chance to write Ultron again, because becoming editor-in-chief and everything, and then drifting over to doing more Conan and less superheroes, I didn't get a chance. But certainly the Vision and Ultron are up there. Other than that, I was thinking, especially at Marvel, I didn't create that many characters. I mean, I was happy with, I loved our version of Warlock, was nice. Sometimes it was just revitalizing, like the Captain Marvel that was the science fiction version of the old Shazammer, things like this. But the Vision and Ultron as a 1-2 punch was, probably I think I've sort of been going downhill since then.
So Steve,
Roy,
go ahead.
What about the forbidden white fur?
The what?
From the man-ape.
Oh, yeah. Well, look, life is too short to argue with idiots. I do it sometimes, though, but, I understand that people would see this, but, I'm a reasonably sophisticated person. I do not equate black people with apes, gorillas, chimpanzees, or anything like that. Never have. And so when I made this thing up, I thought about that possibility, but, I had to have the Black Panther fighting someone. I wanted another animal totem. And, a giraffe man was not quite right. The rhino was already taken. That would have been good. Hippo sounds kind of clumsy more. It's not the only one that would have made other sense, but that would have been almost a repeat of the Panther, would have been to have had a lion character. And you got Kraven already running around with a lion.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so I just decided, you have a Black Panther and a white gorilla, and so forth. And there wasn't that much about that then. It was the oversensitive snowflakes of the 21st century who have come up with this. And I'm quite happy if they want to call him M'Baku and never call him Man-Ape, it's fine with me. I have no vested interest. And yet in the movies, like they get away from Man-Ape, but they have him going, hoo, why didn't somebody jump at him for that? These people are just, I promise not to swear, they're just crazy. They're idiots. I don't care. Black, white, purple. They're idiots.
I've always.
But that's just my personal
I've
opinion.
always loved that character, and whenever I'm, selling books, I'll always, bring out the Avengers 62, and I just love the Black Panther's face when he sees the forbidden white fur. I just love that scene. I read it like once a month. I just love that character. So for me, the man ape. I love the man ape.
He didn't think
Me too.
he didn't think it was step infected in a white fur,
Yes.
I was trying to get away with that, I'm just a racist at heart, like we all are.
All right, Nile, any closing comments?
Yeah, Michael, this was great. I love diving into this. There's actually been nothing better than actually having the writer here in the house that worked on this book, talking about us, giving us some personal details.
I wish
Even
John
my
were
boy.
around, to do it. I wish John were around to say, he never talked about it though. To him, it was all crap, but
Yes.
Hey, it's crap we all love, and even my good friend Jim Valentino posted on Facebook just to say for the promo for this. He said, "When you talk about the Marvel universe, you have to talk about the guy who pieced it all together, Roy Thomas."
Wow.
Well,
Look at that.
I just
There
picked
you
up the pieces Stan left lying around, or Jack, or whatever, and we went off. I did a little something, but if it hadn't been for Stan and Jack and to some extent Steve, I'd still be up there, trying to find ways not to flunk students, in some high school somewhere. So I'm quite happy I got a chance to do what I did, and that it wasn't in a way though. I just tried to pick up the pieces that Stan wasn't doing because Stan got busier and busier from doing the 7 or 8 books a month that he used to write. He didn't have time for all that, and I had interest in that area even more than he did because. I actually liked comics. Stan was just writing it because he had drifted into it and he had a talent for it and a great talent for it. But I actually, liked comic books. I was, that was to people like me and Marv and Len, Jerry Conway. This is where we wanted to be. We weren't doing this till we could write a comic strip, we wouldn't have minded that, or till we could write the great American novel. Maybe some of us wanted to do things like that too. But we were happy to be where we were, and if we never got any further, that was okay with me.
Wow.
But I think this issue, the flashback sequences, you had 3 flashback sequences in one issue. I don't remember Stan ever doing 3 flashback in one issue, and I think that's the difference. Stan was great at the singular narrative, okay, because obviously he was writing a lot of books a month, but your issues were more complex. So because the way you were thinking about it and putting those 3 flashbacks in there together, it's a little bit more complicated than the Stan story, if you kind of get my point.
Yeah, I didn't have the skill. I'm not the natural writer that Stan was, but so I had to work harder, to do it. And I probably brought more consciously intellectual. That doesn't mean that the comics turned out very intellectual. I wasn't retrying that, but I think I thought about it in a different way, because Stan and I had such different, backgrounds. He was a child of the Depression. He got into thing, and he brought great natural talents, just like Jack did in his own way, and other people. My talents were, I wasn't any intellectual, but I was, but I had an academic background. I had almost gone into graduate school and a career in foreign relations, or been an Egyptologist a couple of years earlier, but I had the money. So therefore, I just had that kind of interest, and Stan saw that, so he kind of, as long as I wouldn't go too far. Now, Stan didn't like flashbacks that much, and if I'd come to it, I'm going to do a story with 3 flashbacks in it, and each one is further back than the other, and squeeze into a 20-page story, he probably wouldn't have liked it. But luckily, by 1968, he trusted me enough that he was still following out that thing he had told Saul Brodsky a year or so earlier after editing me heavily for a few months. He said, just from now on with Roy, just show me the first page and the last page of any story he does, and if they're okay, I'll figure the middle's okay too. That saved him a lot of reading, and already sent me a lot of letters.
That's awesome. All right, Mother Hen, Steve.
Well, thank you very much for having me on. It's been fun.
Oh, and obviously Roy's our mascot. He'll be back. So, Steve, get us out of here.
You know what? What a great show we had today. Boom!
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us on Pop XP. If you haven't already, make sure to click that subscribe button and also click the bell for notifications when we go live and we upload some awesome new content. Also, don't forget to head on over to Twitter and follow us at the Pop XP and over on Instagram at the Pop XP. Thanks again everyone, and we'll see you soon.